Hello? I cannot hear you. What, dude? I think my software is glitching out here pretty bad. Let's see. Let's go big. Now, can you guys in the chat here? Anybody? What happened? Let's close that down. Okay. Can you guys hear me? That switched over before I was ready for it. Notifications. I guess has joined. That was weird. Oh, now I can hear you.
You got it?
Sorry, that was super trippy. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It got like frozen on like two different screens, and it was not going good.
Oh, that's weird. I can't even see chat on my end. That's weird.
Yeah, you're not the first person that's told me that. I don't really know how that works with Streamlabs, but I don't know.
Oh shoot, are we live right now?
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It just like it went live before I even transferred the scene over.
I haven't been on this side of Streamlabs yet. I just started using them earlier this week and last week, and
yeah,
boy, I am super compressed on this screen. Damn. That must be a feature of the whatever view you've got going on there.
Yeah, it's got like in the collab cam. I'm not sure. I'm not real tech savvy, so you have to forgive me on that one.
It looks fine. Look. I'll kind of show you what I'll look right there. I just kind of squished up. It's kind of interesting. I didn't realize I couldn't see chat if I was a guest. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think you're the second person that's told me that. They couldn't see the chat. But yeah. Anyway, I should probably introduce you. For though I'm sure most people in the chat already know who you are. But for those who don't or watching later, John Douglas, author of The Black Crown. That's your debut novel, right?
Yeah, it's not the first one I've written. It is the first one I've finally put out there to publish.
Okay. Yeah, you are also a booktuber. It's just your name at YouTube, right? John A. Douglas?
Yeah, John A. Douglas. That's the brand.
Nice. And I've seen on X, The Black Crown Publishing. I'm guessing that's you, right?
Oh, well, what happened was that's kind of the backup account. The account that I'm using now, you have to forgive me, I'm a little under caffeinated right now, so the brain might not be working fully functioning. The account that's John A. Douglas was my original account, and it got banned on Twitter for the use of a GIF of a guy getting an obvious mannequin getting smashed in the back of the head with a baseball bat. That was one of my favorite GIFs to use reaction GIFs to use in arguments. And it got interpreted either by somebody who was way too sensitive or by an AI bot as a violent threat. And so that went down, and I switched over to John A. Douglas on the Black Crown author account. And for about a year, and I kept trying every now and then to appeal it, because I had friends tell me, look, if you get your account banned, it's a new day with Musk kind of taking over. And so like people who got banned in the past, like keep appealing until you get a person. And there are specific ways you can sit there and say, look, I was making my, because I had a check mark and it was kind of a brand, like I was told, word it like this, right? I'm frozen for some reason. Now that's an issue with my camera, not yours.
All right.
I'll try and fix it though.
Audio, so that works.
So anyway, I can't stop my illustrious voice. So anyway, you gotta phrase it in a particular manner. You gotta say like, we were making money. This is our problem. How are you going to fix our problem? Right. And that's how I did it every time. And after a year, it finally went through. I see myself frozen on the phone screen, and my camera's decided to go kaput. You know what? I'm just gonna have to buy another camera at this point, because this has been happening almost every time I go either Streamlabs or whatnot. But
Yeah. No worries. I mean,
for
your
those of
audio's
you,
coming in nice and crisp.
yeah, that's fine. That's all well and good. So I guess we'll just roll with it like this. Hello to everyone from Frozen Face Land.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't really mess with Twitter too much when Dorsey was in charge, and then when Musk came in, that's kind of when I got a Twitter, and then X now. But yeah, I didn't even try messing with it during that whole escapade era.
I was on it just because that's kind of where the big conversation was, and when I came first into the indie spaces, and I was trying to find, where's the biggest, I wanted to be where indie readers and indie authors were.
Yeah.
Where are they at? Where are they gathering? Who's saying what? I wanted to kind of be as much on the cutting edge of of everyone's conversation and what everyone was reading as much as possible. So I was all over the place. And Twitter is where I ended up finding the most traction, which is why I kind of wagged my finger a little about everybody who decided to self and exile themselves over on Blue Sky, where there's absolutely no engagement. And guess what, guys? No sales either. So
right.
That's where you will find me on Blue Sky, but you'll find me everywhere. I'm on Minds, I'm on Truth, I'm on in Discord servers, just about everywhere you can find. Like my videos go out. I'm on like 4 different video services. I put them all over the place just to try and cast as wide a net as possible.
Yeah,
and that's always been my belief.
Yeah, I put a couple things on Rumble, but I get better traction on YouTube than I do on Rumble.
Yeah. Rumble's a very particular little place, and it's one of those situations where you're only going to get a significant following on another platform like that if you've already got a significant following on YouTube.
Yeah,
it's the same thing over on Odyssey. If you've even the big dogs on YouTube, like it's a bit of a pittance over on Rumble, and I really do want them to kind of succeed well, because it is good to have alternatives, but at the same time, a lot of these places ended up being political life rafts. We're seeing Blue Sky, the same thing that happened to Getter back in the day, which it's just political content, and that's really a turnoff for a lot of people, because it's not really normally content, only for those who are the most politically engaged. And for a lot of people, really, creative spaces are where they go to kind of get away from that. That's exactly the kind of thing that I have applied for myself.
Yeah. I think it was Parlor, and I was on Truth a little bit, but the same thing. It was very it was just like a lot of not that Twitter is not full of politics either, but there's the good book space on Twitter, and video game space, like the Gamergate guys, some of them here and there.
Yeah, it is. It's a mosh pit, and you have to accept that. You have to accept that you're going to be thrown into a violent mosh pit, and you're going to get hit.
Yeah,
you have to be prepared to kind of hit back. And you have to be kind of prepared to jimmy rig your own algorithm to really just see the content that you want to see and interact with the things you want to interact, and kind of ignore a lot of conversations you don't really want to take part in. Because once you know how to navigate that and parse through it, Twitter does end up being one of the places. It's where I've met some of my best indie author friends, some of the best people in the indie spaces and the communities. There's other spaces out there, but like they're a little harder to kind of parse through, especially like on Facebook. I haven't really mastered going through all those groups, because that's a lot of self-serving nonsense and too many rules.
Yeah,
that's the thing I like about Twitter the most, is there's a lot fewer rules. You try going around in the indie fantasy spaces and in the groups on Facebook, first thing you're hit with is don't talk about this, don't do this, don't mention this, don't start arguments, don't be like. It's like Super Winnie Hut Jr. for authors.
Yeah.
Just to try and preserve people's feelings. And it's not that I go out of my way to insult people or hurt their feelings, but at the same time, it's a level of forced toxic positivity that is not natural to most people.
Oh man, dude, forced or the toxic positivity. I mean, you look at people like I'm not trying to make fun of her or anything, but like Ariana Grande, I feel legitimately sad for that girl. She looks like she's like very sick, and like I don't know. I feel like nobody around her is telling her that she needs to get some help because they're so like.
She looks like her favorite
positive.
meal is. She looks like her favorite meal is a nothing burger.
Yeah, right. But yeah, you know what? As you're talking about Twitter, actually, like that's how I discovered you, and you posted like something about you basically brought my attention to Land and Sea, and thank you for doing that because I love it. I'm a Patreon member of theirs now, and they're releasing like STLs for their new minis for the new war game. Man,
oh sweet, I got to get in on that.
Yeah, it's great. One of the guys in there he's actually going to send me because I don't have a printer. He's going to print it for me, send it my way. But super ready for that. But we should probably talk about you a little bit in your book and stuff, huh?
Hey, I don't mind talking about other indie authors. I mean, most of my channel is like I've always said, never be ashamed to shill, never be ashamed to self shill. I'll stop my stream and shill somebody else just because something reminds me of them. You talk about Land and Sea, and that's kind of becoming my BattleTech and a little bit of my Star Wars replacement as I kind of go through the series. I'm still only on the second book, which the cover of that has my favorite Asher on it, the Rhino.
The Rhino.
On the Rhino, not for any logical reason other than I just love the way it looks.
Yeah,
it's to me just the best looking one, and I really need to catch up. But holy shit, man, Blaine Lee Pardoe is such a prolific writer. Like this dude is
puts out so much.
It's ridiculous. I was looking at his 10-year books, right, and I was asked if I could read it and put out a review. I'm like, sure, no problem. When let me try this other book first and whatnot. And I look up, not only is the second book about to come out, he's talking about the third book's off to the editor, like, Jesus.
Yeah. And then
I wish I had that much
coming
time.
Out.
Oh my God, don't remind me, man. I'm so far behind. I want to be caught up on Land and Sea. And I was reading I had a lot of stalls this month, and if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I had some family health issues going on with my daughter. Being in and out of the hospital didn't facilitate a lot of really, a lot of reading time or want to read.
Yeah.
And I was reading a book. I can say it on here. It's a Vigilante's Creed by B.A. Turner. And I'm temporarily DNFing because he's taking the campaign, which is the only place to buy the damn book, off of Fund My Comic. And he's going to put it up on Amazon a little later in a few months, he said. I said, well, okay, well, look. I'm not going to drop the review now because normally I don't stop reading a book in the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
I very, very rarely DNF anything. And it took me a little while to get going into this one because I had to figure out how to kind of read this. I'll explain it in my review. But I stopped reading it because there's other books that I need to read. And it wouldn't make no sense for me to finish reading this book and get ready for a review and there's nowhere for anyone to buy a book. So I told him, well, look, when you put the book on Amazon, I will back on Amazon because it's bounced on and off a couple times. Then I'll drop my review because, if people are like, oh, this sounds great. Where can I buy it? Oh, you can't? That's not real helpful there.
Yeah.
So I started reading. I'm reading an arc right now that comes out next week. I'm hoping I can finish it in time. It's Z.S. Diamante's Garden the Garden. It's his new cozy fantasy. And not too far into it, but I got to tell you, the switch between from epic fantasy to cozy fantasy for him is a really it was already the fingerprints for a cozy fantasy were already in the DNA of his original Stone and Sky trilogy. Like there were parts of those books that read like cozy fantasies.
Yeah,
I'm not
familiar with that subgenre. What exactly is cozy fantasy?
Cozy fantasy is depending on who you ask, a lot of times it ends up just being sapphic romance. But cozy fantasy is like low stakes. It's more vibes and slice of life stuff. Not there's not a quest to go on. There's no antagonist. It's but if it's done right, it can be really well. It's a very easy read. I'll put it to you like this. The Harvest Moon games or Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
Or those would be what you would consider are the video game equivalents of cozy fantasy, which it's just something to chill. It's not gonna have you up at 2 a.m. going, oh my God, what happens next?
Yeah.
But if you know what you're doing, they can be pretty interesting. Andrew D. Meredith put out one called Quaint Creatures, and it was about a veterinarian. And there was a little mystery to solve that was in that book that kind of tied together at the end. I was like, oh, this is actually, this is way better than I thought it would be. I thought it was just going to be, vibes, cozy vibes. And I was really enjoying that. So this is about a Garden of the Garden's about a war veteran, because the Diamante, he is a former Marine.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was part of the chaplain services. So he's got a story about a dwarf warrior who's injured in battle and he can't go back to war. So now he's kind of got to pick the pieces up of his life. And that's kind of where it's started rolling. That's where I'm at right now. He's kind of trying to, get his footing back, figure out where he belongs in this world now that he can't fight no more.
Yeah. It almost seems like maybe it sounds a little bit like it might be more of a almost literary genre fiction. Like, cause
yeah, well,
with a whole lot of like action going on,
But yeah, with a with more of a fantasy flair to it,
Yeah.
kind of a fantasy skin, which that's what romantasy is. It's just a romance novel with dragons and fairies.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I've ever read a romance. My mom does, but I've never actually read a strictly like a romance novel before. Have you ever read one?
Back in the day, I always have read outside my preferred genre just to kind of, as a storyteller and a writer, kind of pick up what I can pick up from other authors and other genres and kind of see what's different, how they approach the storytelling element differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I have actually read, I think it was sci-fi romantasy of sorts way back in the day, back when I was in nursing school in, I want to say 2010. A co-worker swapped books with me and I read it. I'm getting this author's name wrong. I think it was Sherilyn Kenyon. Very prolific romance author, puts a lot of flair on it. And as I was reading it, I was struck by the fact that there was a lot of the world building and everything was really kind of weak, or at least compared to what I was used to in the genre. And once I got done reading the book, I don't remember what its title was because it kind of didn't hold on to me. But what I figured out was, in a romance book, or at least in a book where the romance is the main thrust, no pun intended, of the genre, the romance and the relationship, that is the primary plot that's going on. Everything else kind of falls away as a bit of a subplot. And that's why when you read them, a lot of the world building and storytelling elements will feel a lot more weaker in comparison to all the thought and whatnot that goes into the interaction, intricate character interaction between these two people who are usually very desperately trying not to fall in love and inexplicably falling in love at the same time. Many such cases.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna have to pick one up because I do, like you said, I like to kind of like read a broad spectrum of books. I mean, I have the ones I like, middle sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that. But every once in a while, especially like when I was in college for like English, there were some books I never would have read, and I ended up really liking them. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up. If anyone in the chat or yourself want to recommend a good romantasy story to me, let me know.
I would show the book off, but Umbra by Amber Taro has been making the rounds. Everybody seems to love it, and it looks pretty good. I bought it, and I've always said I know that there's probably a romantasy out there that would kind of hit all the things that I like in a book. I would just need to hear from somebody who's read them and has kind of a similar taste to me, because I know if I just pick up Akatar or what's that other one, Fourth Wing, I know that wouldn't do it for me, because I've watched Crimson Rogue's like 6-hour review of Fourth Wing and picking it apart, and I'm going, okay, obviously it's like the romantasy novels. The romance is the big part of it, and you have so many other story contradictions and inexplicable choices made and world building that's just kind of confounding. It's like, I don't understand why you can't have all these things all be good, but for some reason the romantasy authors and a lot of the more popular ones seem to fall into this particular pit of the romance is really good, but everything else is just kind of dog shit. In comparison, whereas you read like the inverse of that, usually romance in a genre fiction is kind of a subplot of sorts. It's there as part of the main journey. Even in my book, The Black Crown, there was some romance there, I can't spoiler or talk about it too much. Art Snow's in the chat. She can confirm that was a. I said, look, you're the first female who's read the Black Crown all the way through. How did the romance hit for you? And she loved it. She absolutely adored it. And her books, which are basically Fallout Texas, her books lean heavily into romance. And she has really intricate, really good romance storytelling types. But she doesn't skimp on the world building aspect. She actually builds her worlds up an exceptional amount. See, there she is in the chat saying confirmed.
Yeah, man. I wonder if it's almost like a business. Like, is it just that genre, that subgenre, like the trope? Like, is that the readers don't necessarily care about like the world building? They just want that romance. Maybe that's, if that's what you readers want, they're just kind of given.
It must be if what I've seen from a lot of reviewers and whatnot that about the quality of like the world building and some of the more popular romantasy elements. That seems to be the case, as long as they're giving their readers what they want. And look, you can go on the other end of the other side of the coin, and you can find the guy version of this. It's basically the harem lit genre, and I've read a couple of those, and they just come across as like really kind of basic boilerplate fantasies or isekais with explicit scenes kind of thrown in. It's never really been my thing, but the fans that the readers that like that kind of thing to eat it up, and it's definitely selling well within that particular subgenre.
Yeah. Where should we go? So indie authors. Try get onto that topic. So you're the first indie author I've had on, but you're not the first one I've read. The first one I read was Theft of Fire by Devin Erickson.
Yes.
So like, did you have any experience with Trad Pub, or are you straight indie?
I was, that was the dream early on, right? When I made the decision after being a hobby writer for about 10, 12 years or so in the 90s, where I was reading something I wrote and I thought, man, this is really good. And I like rereading this. I bet I could probably do this. And I kind of, set that dream in there. I'd like to be a published author one day. And so started writing books that were half finished and weren't that great. And, I actually owned magazines that told you how to get published and all that stuff. And I had a bit of a slump in the aughts because of life and changing careers and a whole bunch of other stuff when I always told myself, all right, I got to write that novel. And when I finally sat down to kind of refocus on that, because I would write novels, half finish them, not finish them. I would finish some novels, but I would think, this is not it. This just doesn't click the way I want it to. And I think it was about 2019, the seed for what would become the Black Crown started cooking in my head. And about halfway through writing that book, I was pushing myself through and forcing myself. This is the book that I'm going to finish. And even some people who have read it have said, once you hit the halfway point through the book, you can kind of see it click both in my writing and in my head. That is exactly when it kind of clicked with me. Then I kind of started to look at the landscape, and the landscape of publishing had changed by then significantly. There's no other real way to say it. The publishing industry is now mostly a feminine space, and there's not a whole lot of spaces for men. And I started to see the indies pop up. And the more I dug into the indies, the more I realized these were authors who realized that no matter how good they were, the publishing industry would not do anything with them. The biggest fantasy author today, Brandon Sanderson, he's grandfathered in, right? Like he got big before the big shakeups. And even now, some of the pressure of what the publishing industry likes to have is kind of settled in with his most recent book.
Yeah, I've kind of been following.
But you've got, and that didn't really instill me with a lot of confidence to want to pick up those particular books. I've heard great things, and I may still do it. But as big as those books are, and as many as there are, there's more indie authors that would prefer someone read their book more than I need to be another member of Brando Sando's fan club.
Yeah.
So, and the more I started, what I saw in the indie spaces that kind of started drawing me was the covers. they were making covers that looked like the kind of covers I used to grab off the shelf, the kind that were really pretty and had an evocative fantasy and science fiction imagery that really made me want to pick the book up and buy it sight unseen without even bothering reading the blurb. Like 90% of what I buy has always been cover buys. So I've always bought my books kind of like that. The blurb may sell me a little bit, but I mean, even if it's a boilerplate fantasy with a pretty cool cover, I still like to read it. It doesn't have to blow me away, be a 10 out of 10 every time. But the thing about the indies is they were doing things with the covers that were drawing me in, like, oh, this cover looks cool. I started buying ebooks like crazy. And that's when I kind of met a couple of individuals that really made a very successful career. At the time, they were more successful with the old school Amazon book algorithm that's not really viable anymore. Guys like David West and John Della Rose and David Stewart. And a couple of others, and I was trying to I was like, this is what's working for them in the indies, and I could let my book rot on a slush pile for in a traditional publisher's editor's desk and get 10,000 rejection letters too, and Lord knows that the indies there's no shortage in the writing community of people who have Andy Anderson is querying there's no shortage of people that doing that, right? So it's not like competition in that space has slowed down, but I very much know that I'm not the demographic that the publishing industry wants to push. Knowing that the indies, I kind of saw, you know what? I've always been better in online spaces anyway. I can work on my building myself up with a YouTube channel. I'll just take this approach and ride or die. And that's kind of where I am now. And I really have. I've really enjoyed being in the indies. I've enjoyed the authors that I've met, the books that I've gotten. All right, Snow, she's down there. Bless her heart, she's down there. I've read her book and I loved it. And it's not the kind of book that the traditional publishing industry would publish. It would edit down all of the personality out of that story. And it's not told in a way that a traditional editor would have said, okay, you need to cut this out, or you need to parse this down. You don't need to have this. And, she took what she loved, the romanticism of post-apocalypse, science fiction, a world that is in ruin, and the romance of old school Westerns, and threw them all together in a blender and came up with her Watcher of the Dam series. And I crave that kind of uniqueness. I love that kind of uniqueness from the indies. And I'm glad. I much prefer to be part of that particular apparatus. Would it be great to get money from, earn a living doing books? I'd love to do that. And I hope that I can reach that one day as an indie. But it's definitely you probably got a better chance winning the lottery than getting published in the current state of the publishing industry. And make no mistake, there are indie authors out there who are, from a sales perspective, are putting some of the mid and lower tier authors in the industry to absolute shame.
Yeah. I mean, you guys, like, as an indie author, you have to cover the costs up front, but then you're taking the profit for yourself.
Well, that's something I've always taken from advice from Diamond Dallas Page. He's been a hell of a mentor as an individual. I was kind of ingrained in the DDP yoga community for the last 15 years. Probably not as much in the last couple years, but
is there a Facebook group for that? Because I gotta get in on that.
Yeah. There's a big Facebook group, and it's usually very positive and supportive. It was a great place. I was a mod there for a little while, but he's someone that's always said, invest in yourself. I mean, I kind of believe in this, and it's been a little bit of a controversy the last couple days on Twitter, because Beard of Darkness, Matt from Beard of Darkness, was pointing out, like, he might not have worded it quite as tactfully, but he was basically trying to say, look, you put all this work into your book. You want it to be as professional looking as possible. And you do see this from indie authors. You see indie authors that put their there's some rare cases they can do their own stuff. Christopher Brenning does his own editing. He doesn't need an editor. A couple of Travis Baldry, when he was still in the indies, he did his own audio books, right? And some people do their own covers. God bless them. Must be nice. But if you do put in all this, putting in that polish of professional sheen, or at the very least, knowing how to make your book as distinct as possible to stand out, is a really important thing, because than just slapping some Photoshop on there and calling it a day. At the very least, if you can't afford a high-end artist for your book, making it, I would show off some of the books that I've got that have distinctive covers that don't that have personality. They stand out. They're different from the norm, and that's what's good. Yeah. As great as a good piece of art is. Now, I do put out the money for the kind of cover that I have, and this cover has been a wonderful blessing because it's elicited cover buys, which I knew that would work for people who think like me.
Yeah,
I was trying to. I needed a cover that would attract a buyer like me. So I knew what I wanted, and I got an artist that would kind of reflect that taste. And it's a great cover. And I'm about to contract him again for the second book. And oh boy, I did not realize there was a dead roach in my water cup here. I've been drinking on this thing for like 15 minutes.
Oh no!
I'm gonna put that aside.
At least it wasn't on video.
And oh my God, right? I'm gonna real quick text my wife to bring me a clean cup of water.
Brutal. But yeah, while you're doing that, totally agree. That cover is
thankfully it was on top of the water.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, you mentioned it there, but you are working on the sequel.
Yeah. We can talk about the first book if you want.
Oh yeah, we should probably do that
before we get too far ahead of us.
Yeah.
Ahead of ourselves. Yeah, the Black Crown was inspired by a couple sessions of Dungeons and Dragons, and I was just trying to figure out what would it look like from a statistic and a aesthetic point of view if I created all these characters that had like one race as a parent, and another race as a parent that you don't normally see together, right? And the first one I created was this half goblin, half elf character who wound up in the book named Ollie. And then I created her sister, who was half goblin but half orc, and I'm like, what is she, like a little green Tasmanian devil? and that led to me thinking, okay, what if there was a half orc character, but he was more like a human, right? He was kind of clever. Actually, what if he was more than clever? What if he was a really bookish, sort of shy character? What would it look like if he was in charge of a bunch of big brutish orcs, a whole tribe? How would he become that kind of a leader? How would he get there? So I kind of started at where I wanted the character to end up at, and I reverse engineered step by step. Okay, how did he get here? Why is he on this journey? His family kicked him out. Why did his family kick him out? Or why was he driven out by this circumstance? What circumstances was this? And parsed through a lot of questions until I ended up getting a really good starting point. And, that ended up becoming the plot of the Black Crown. And the main character, Prince Ragoth, is a half-orc prince of a world called Allspire. The ruling class of the continent of Evergrad is this collective of kingdoms and empires known as the Crown Pantheon, of which he is a prince of. His mother is the queen of the only human kingdom. She was at the end of a conflict that was decades long, known as the Orc War. She was kidnapped by his father, Thorgoth. And when the Crown Pantheon fought together to try and rescue her and eliminate the orcs entirely, they rescued her, and she wound up being several months pregnant with the prince. And then fast forward about 17 years, he's on the cusp of what's known as his crowning, which is... in the Crown Pantheon, when you are crowned, you are on your 17th birthday given a enchanted gilded mark in your palm that is kind of carved there with a magical device. And basically, it's an identification of a magical identification that it proves you are who you say you are, and it can't be replicated. So before that happens, shenanigans happen. I'll just say that. And he ends up being cast out and sent on a quest to find his father's tribe in the lawless lands of Dreadmore. And along the way, he meets, as many epic quests do, he meets some friends along the way. There's only 2 POV characters in the book, and that's Ragoth and Cortland Lowhelm, his pugilistic farm boy friend.
Yeah.
Most of the characters, one thing you'll notice if you read my writing, one of the things I like to do is I like to write against type. I don't want to use the phrase subvert your expectations, because that is such a load. That has been so loaded with bad media these days. It's I don't want to do that, but most of my characters are against type. Usually the half orc is a kind of a brutish, dull-witted character. Ragoth is he's not a runt. He's a normal human size. He's about 5'9", right?
Yeah.
But certainly not as weak as a human, but not nearly as strong as most half orcs. But he kind of makes up for it with, exceptional intelligence. He lived in isolation for 17 years. Hold on a second. My water is here. I was drinking that water and looked down there, and look what I saw. Thank you so much for bringing me a new water.
What happened to March or April or May?
What?
April, May.
I can't have a conversation. I'm on stream right now.
Just saying.
I'll talk to you when I'm done. My wife does not take my streaming seriously in the slightest.
Nice.
Okay. Now that I've got the taste of roach water out of my mouth.
Well, at least you caught it for too long.
Yeah, right. At least I didn't actually drink the thing up through a straw. Anyway, Ragoth, or Rags to his friends, he was living in isolation for 17 years until the shenanigans happened. And he lived in a library wing, so he's not only read the entire library more than once, he's also got perfect recall. So he's like a walking info dump. But this is kind of how I got around like lore dumps in my book. When I do need to have like a little short paragraph or two of lore dump, it's usually him rattling off the top of his head something about the world he knows, but something that he has not something he has never seen before. So he's kind of against type. He's a bookish half orc, very a little naive and good natured. Whereas his friend that he meets, Cortland Lowhelm, is much different. If you ever wonder what Gaston from Beauty and the Beast will be like if he said, you know what, I'm too good for this town, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be something better than a big fish in a small pond, that's Cortland. He's a farm boy. He's a potato farmer's son, right, who wanted to be an adventurer, kind of ran out of money, and now he's trying to get his adventuring legs back and become a knight. But he's not as good natured. He's fiery tempered. He's antagonistic. He's quick to anger. So he's not quite the farm boy archetype.
Yeah.
And so they end up running across a couple other characters, like Denny, who is an elf, who unlike most elves who have magic or bows and arrows, Denny is actually Denny is a religious goodwill worker, and he's arc blind, so he does not have any magic whatsoever. In fact, he doesn't really have any skills. He's kind of useless, and Cortland calls him out on this at several points. And he's just kind of there as a morale character. They had an extra seat basically, and to protect them, they acquire the services of Mora, who is an adventurer, an experienced adventurer, mercenary, arena champion, who's down on her luck, and she doesn't really want to babysit a bunch of wet-nosed, greenhorn adventurers, but she needs the money, right? So she kind of feels corralled into this, and off they go on their adventure. And each character is kind of a contradiction against each other. They complement each other. They contrast against each other. I'm a big believer in characters being the centerpiece for a book, because if you don't care about your characters, you're not going to care about what happens to them in their world. Oh no, the world's ending. Well, okay, your main character's kind of boring. I kind of hope it ends for him, so whatever. I see in the chat what's going on. I was talking to Matt from Beard of Darkness, and did he post something? I'm just.
I think they're referring to what you were saying. He's like giving advice or whatever. I think that's.
Oh yeah, that was a bit of a contentious idea. I mean, contentious notion. Hopefully everybody gets over their hurt feelings for too long and gets back to doing what's important. So I put a lot of that work into the characters, and most reviewers love the characters, right? And that heartens me, because I wanted this to feel like an adventure with friends that you would love to go on an adventure with, right? Like you're there with them the entire time, and not so much worried about like the big plot that's definitely chasing them down, but for those few moments, where you've got little bits of slice of life and character interaction, and trying to marry a lot of old school and newer school sensibilities. So it was a lot of fun to write, but I did a lot to try and keep it going along. There's some twists and turns. I can say that now. It's been a year since the book's been out. There are some twists to the plot. Some people saw a couple coming. Nobody saw all of them coming. And I get everybody's pleasantly surprised. Who doesn't like a story that kind of surprises you a little bit?
Yeah.
I didn't sell it on the notion of a twist, because, and I'm not going to do it for every book, because look, what happened with M. Night Shyamalan? He pulled off some great cinematic twists, and then everybody kept expecting his next movie to one up his previous movies, and he just couldn't keep that going after a while.
Speaking of him, I just watched. It was the last time me and my wife actually had a date. We went to go see his new movie. Let's see, it's called Trap, with Josh Hartnett, where he's like a serial killer in the stadium. It was actually pretty. We enjoyed ourselves. I liked it.
I think he kind of I think after a while he kind of readjusted, and kind of went back to doing stuff that was a little more boilerplate stuff. They didn't rely on a clever twist at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Because after a while, everybody was like, "Oh, it's M. Night Shyamalan. What's the twist this time?" Well, after a while, you kind of expect that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it gets kind of hard to surprise people when they're hyper looking.
Yeah.
They're hyper focused on trying to find what you're trying to swerve them on, and like that can lead to real disaster. Not just a bad story or an underwhelming, disappointing story. Like sometimes it can lead to a very confusing and convoluted ending. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the writers of Lost fell into that trap where people were guessing what they were actually going to do, and they changed it based on that feedback so that the theories would not be right. And it wound up being an ending that was not the planned ending. It ended up being an ending that a lot of people were disappointed by. I didn't watch Lost, so I can't say it disappointed me. My expectations were already at zero.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that one. As far as world building goes with your book, I haven't finished yet. Like I'm at the point where they're at a city that has something to do with a hand. I don't want any spoilers, but anyway,
that's not a spoiler. Arcathoria is the best thing I thought up in the book.
All right.
That was born out of my desire for, like, whenever characters go somewhere, it's a weird little mentality that I told myself a long time ago. Everywhere they go, something should happen, or something should be interesting to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be, I kind of take this approach of, I love epic fantasy art. I love concept art. And when you see concept art for video games and movies, it never looks that good on screen, right? So that's kind of what I wanted some of my locations to be. Well, they're at another city. What's special about this city? Nothing. Okay, no. Something has to be interesting about this city. Mm-hmm. What if it was built into what if it was built into the palm of this mountain-sized stone hand?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rule of cool drives a lot of my creativity.
Yeah. I definitely like your magic system and like the whole arcane order and how it's policed. But yes, with your world building, you have, like, before the chapters start, you usually put like little, like citations from some book that exists within your world, like an educational book or something like that, academic. So I like that. How long did you spend? Because it seems like a very in-depth world that you've made. Did you spend a ton of time building this, or did you kind of just make it as you were going?
I took kind of the a boilerplate kind of fantasy world, and I built on it as I went. And a lot of where I went, everywhere I went, I kind of wanted to see what can I do here that's a little different from your standard fantasy, from your boilerplate fantasy. Um, and I ended up developing the interstate system based the dwarf road it's referred to. I ended up creating this cast of ruling class, the crown pantheon, and we don't delve into them too much, even though Ragoth is very involved in them, because what's really important is just what's happening to him. I mean, this is Ragoth's story.
Yeah.
And so, as it goes along, and I want every location to be kind of interesting. I want a lot of it's just an attempt to try and beat back anything boring, right? So maybe I provide a little wrinkle of storytelling so that it's not something you've heard before, or if it is something you've heard before, maybe it's a different take on something you've heard before. Like the magic in Allspire is not some big grand system. The approach that I took to it, rather than creating a whole magic system, which I think Brandon Sanderson definitely influenced a lot of people in that regard, and I think some people can kind of get lost in the weeds trying to create a magic system that works and ways to work around it. I just created magic that works, but it requires very, very specific conditions to work properly. And if you don't do it right, it can go very wrong. And I came up with a world where magic is highly policed, because the people who practice magic are scared to death that another Cell Rock will pop up. He's the kind of Sauron-ish figure in their history, where he was a sorcerer who had no upper limit, and he was responsible for a damn near destroying the entire world in his attempt to attain godhood. And he was so close to that goal that the gods themselves stepped out of their divine realm just to kick his ass and basically nuke him off the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And so once they did end up organizing, the magic users did end up organizing into a solidified form. They're like, we don't want this to happen again, because it almost killed all of creation the last time. So, they became militaristic and very rigid and strict. This is something that I delve into in the next book, The Lionheart, which is another starter book. It's going to be on a different location, different set of characters, but it does tie more into the arcane order and how they police magic, and their kind of counterpart, which is known as the Shadow Spell Society, who are rogue mages, and they have a very loose network, and just kind of show they're kind of the opposite of that. They're the Shadow Spell Society are very loose and scatterbrained in their thinking. Like their leaders at their individual chapters, they rotate roles within their order by throwing down dice just to see. So people will get them will get different roles at random. They have a different leader every so often to avoid like a figurehead.
Yeah.
Right. So that nobody can attain too much power, because they've had that problem in the past where figureheads would attain power and then try to start forming the rogue mages into an army to fight the arcane order. And it's like, that doesn't end well. So we're just not going to do that.
Did you do the dice thing? Because like your story feels very like Dungeons and Dragons influence. Like there's the whole, like the guilds and the adventuring, like people are super, I forgot his name. Cord. He's like super.
Cord,
yeah. He's super obsessed with becoming an adventurer. And then, like, I love the whole aspect of like all the good old days are behind us. Like, there's no work to be had in that arena.
Yeah, there's a bit of a kind of I was inspired by like kind of the dying days of the Old West that you would find in like Red Dead 2 and other areas like that, or like The Sopranos, where they talk about the golden days of the mafia are over, and they're just kind of living, and they're watching it end, and it's just not possible the way it was anymore because all the dungeons have been explored.
Yeah.
And
that right there, I love that that part you had in there, because it's like, yeah, are there just an infinite amount? Like you never like when you play D&D and like Faerun and stuff, it just seems like there's an infinite amount of dungeons to always be explored. But like Is there really like I like that you went like you kind of like asked that question like, well, what happens when all the dungeons have been searched through?
Yeah, I even gave an interesting kind of an origin for them. If you go on my channel and look under the Age of Adventures playlist, I have several videos that I narrated. I'm not great at narration, but I do kind of hit the one quality of my voice that does work, and I expand on some of the lore and some of the history, wherein the quote unquote dungeons as they come to be known. Were leftovers from the War of Sorrows, where Selrock's forces were instructed to like dig in wherever they could to create, forts and backup locations and caches to store weapons, treasures, troops, stuff like that. And they would find any dark nook and cranny they could. Some of them were simple, some of them were elaborate in order to attempt to try and impress him. And so the War of Sorrows was so extensive that it covered the entire face of Evergrad. By the time it was over, that a lot of these quote unquote dungeons were all over the place, and they just ended up naturally becoming home for naturally occurring monsters, unnatural aberrations, or monstrosities that happen to pop up from time to time thanks to the abyss.
Yeah.
Clearing them out ended up becoming like kind of a lucrative thing, because Selrock's forces stole and stored treasure, magic items, and all kinds of shit in there. Like, hey, these dungeons got stuff in them. Let's go, and it became like a really high risk, high reward kind of profession that ended up taking off during the Age of Adventures. And now this story is starting at where it kind of feels like, hey, the golden era is over, and we're kind of living in its last gasp, but maybe there's still a little bit of adventure left.
Yeah. Also, your take on kobolds, instead of being little lizard dragon people, they're little rat folk.
Yeah.
Like that.
Again, trying to be just a little bit different. I wanted a kobold-like creature. I figured, what could I do that's different? I'll make them rat-like instead of lizard-like.
Yeah.
It's just one of them. If you see something that's a nice little touch, that's me trying to think slightly outside the box, but still be close enough in the box that it feels familiar to you.
Yeah. I think I'll stay away. We'll stay away from the subvert expectations term, but maybe a wonderful reimagining. So like that is a good example, or like the dungeons becoming more scarce. Another guy that I really like to read who does that really well with like tropes and like character archetypes is Larry Correia. So he's like in his Monster Hunter series, he has like the trailer park, instead of elves being these elegant creatures, they're like white trash trailer park.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I need to
gangster gnomes.
I need to dig into Larry's work. He's pretty prolific, and he's got some good work. I think he just finished his like 30th novel.
Yeah, he just finished the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior series, and that no shade to you, my friend, but that is my favorite fantasy series. It's incredible.
I got to get in on it. Don't get me wrong. Just because I am ride or die for indies right now doesn't mean I'm like completely against trad pub or traditional authors. Because inevitably there are going to be gems that kind of shine through. I think Larry's one of the ones that's he's another one that's been grandfathered in from a time when the kind of fantasy that I really enjoyed got through and got pushed by the publishers, and he's done really well for Bane.
Yeah,
and they've had some gems as well. If I can put someone on your radar, rest in peace. He is no longer with us. He passed away recently. But Howard Andrew Jones wrote some basically Roman-themed sword and sorcery. The first book was called Lord of a Shattered Land. It's called The Chronicles of Hanovar. He was a big student of history, and he basically came up with this notion of, what if General Hannibal of the Carpathia back in the day, what if he kind of was defeated, but he fought back and he tried to find what was left of his people from Rome, and just led to a really interesting and such a wonderfully well written series of books.
Yeah.
The third one just came out not too long ago, and I haven't finished that one yet. And I'm gonna be kind of sad when I do finish it, because I don't think he's got another. I think he may have written some Hanovar, which is the name of his main character. But you can go look at the reviews on my channel. They're such great books. They're some of the best. And he had an inoperable brain tumor and passed away from it. And it's a shame. He really found his stride. He really found the books that were like his breakout.
Yeah.
He's been writing for a while though. He wrote some of the Pathfinder source books.
Oh, really?
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Nice.
And some of their novels, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I wasn't familiar with him, but I saw people like, mentioning that he passed away and stuff. So that's a bummer, especially like one, obviously when someone dies, but like two, like someone who's gifted and now like we're not going to get any more of his work,
Yeah, it's going to happen to George R. R. Martin's fans. They're going to go through that period of grief. Yeah. I've already cast it off, though. I'm kind of done with Game of Thrones because I'm of the belief that, yeah, very much so. I'm being like Martin is. I'm over Game of Thrones. He's obviously over it.
Yeah,
but I've long said, and I need to do a video on this. Not only do I think he's not going to finish the books, I don't think he can. At least not in 2 books. Because have you read Game of Thrones?
I want to say I've read the first 2, and then I'm like up to season 5 on the show, and then once I heard like the 8th season got such a bad reception, I kind of just stopped. And I don't have HBO, so
well, if you look at where he left off in his books and everything that has to happen in order to actually end the series, he would either have to hyper compress everything into 3 books, or he'd need at least 4 books to resolve. Because there's plot elements that did not make it into the TV show that have not been resolved. There's more characters than the TV show even touched on that have not had their final say. It's just, I don't think he can do it unless he's doing this thing where he writes the books secretly and then releases them and says, "Put them out when I'm dead" or something like that, which would be funny, but
yeah, I almost wonder if he's gonna sometimes when authors die, someone else comes in and help like look at their notes and then they'll help finish the series. I wonder if something like that's gonna happen.
He said he didn't contractually made it so that doesn't happen. I don't know why everybody's like, let Brandon Sanderson finish it. Like, really? Okay, we know he did it for the Wheel of Time. That's all well and good, but like that was his wheelhouse. Like he was used to that kind of material. Like Sanderson is much more of a clean author.
Yeah.
Than Martin. Martin is much more dark and grimdark, and I don't know why people say Sanderson could finish it. I don't know if anyone will finish it or not. The publisher will probably override that at some point.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be him. I enjoyed the books somewhat for what they were. They were very readable too, very deep, and I like that. But as time has gone on, I've kind of fallen out of love of the kind of writing that the kind of themes and whatnot that he puts into his work, where he's kind of trying to be anti-hope and show, hey, people are just scumbags and shitbags. And my book's just a reflection of how awful the real world is. And I got to tell you, I've kind of come to a place where I'm not really big into that anymore.
Yeah.
So I want stuff that's more hopeful, and I provide stuff that's more hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat with you, like that, like everyone's a scumbag, there's no hope. And also people that are like neutral to a fault, to the point where like if they just would have stood up at the right moment, they maybe could have saved a lot of lives, but they were neutral until the point where they couldn't be neutral anymore. I'm kind of over that trope. I feel like that, like I love The Witcher. The Witcher 3 like got me hooked on I didn't know it was a book series. I love that game. And then I found the books, and I do love the books. But I'm kind of just over I don't know.
Geralt being kind of more of a witness to awful things happening instead of actually interfering.
Yeah, and he's like this super, super capable warrior. And it's like you could probably help a lot of people, but I don't know. Like I love him fighting monsters all day. I'm all about that life.
Yeah.
But as far as like how he interacts with the politics of the world, I'm like, oh, come on, dude.
Yeah, he's and believe me, the TV show didn't help either.
Yeah, it was bad.
that first season, it was a little wonkily edited with the time jumps.
The time jumps are all. If you didn't read the books and didn't know the characters, I imagine that's probably really hard to follow.
It was harder than it really needed to be.
Yeah,
but when it worked best, when it was Geralt slaying monsters and slaying pussy. Okay,
Yeah.
bar none, that was what worked the best. And the showrunner said, "Nah,
No.
now we're going to put you, Geralt, we're going to put you on this back burner over here,
Yeah.
and we're going to focus on these female characters, and we're going to make it all about them." They kind of forgot why fans showed up. They wanted to see Henry Cavill as the Witcher, slaying
Yeah.
monsters and slaying pussy. And when it did that, it was great. And when it started to go, let's go on the emotional journey with Yennefer and
Yeah. I will say
mostly about her powers.
I didn't mind Yennefer's origin story in the first season. I thought that was kind of cool to see that. But yeah, I didn't even finish season 2.
Season 2, they basically went on a little emotional journey where they took away her powers and said, how would she deal with not having her powers? Well, turns out that's boring. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's not what fans wanted. And they just doubled down on all the things that drove Henry Cavill away from the show.
Yeah.
Now they've got a fourth season with an actor nobody wants to see in the role. They might as well abort it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Because nobody's going to watch it, and nobody even really saw season 3. And Netflix were begging people with billboards that said Henry Cavill's still in it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I gave up. I didn't watch Blood Origins, and I saw a clip. I watched like the Drinker and Neurotics review it, and the clips are just so cringy and awful. I was like,
that's
wow.
terrible. And talk about killing the interest in what could have been a really good fantasy show. Inept writers have ruined TV fantasy for a generation, right?
Yeah.
Much as I love my indie author friends and all they do, I honestly scratch my head to see some of them go, I'm going to give this season of Wheel of Time and Rings of Power a try. Maybe it'll get better. Like
Rings of Power.
How much of a turd do you have to eat before you realize it tastes like shit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh God. Yeah.
This is where the indies have really been a godsend for me, because I could not force liking these shows anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And some people are just of this mindset of, I don't care if it's good or bad. I'm just glad we're getting something of the brand to begin with. Like, yeah, who cares if it's good or bad? We're still getting more Star Wars, more Lord of the Rings. Like, yeah, but it's done bad. Okay,
that's an ideal consumer right there.
Yeah, and you get this from people who are I forget that I'm older than a lot of the people a lot of the indie authors that I'm friends with. I have been there for when a franchise goes down in the downward creative spiral and is not able to pull out of it.
Yeah.
I see the signs, the red flags are there, and it's just not good. They've lost their mojo and they're not going to get it back. Okay, I watched it happen to the Highlander franchise. I watched it happen to WWE. I watched it happen to several comic books that I was invested in. Sometimes you just lose it and don't get it back. And you just have to let it go and let it die. The Walking Dead was another good one in the comic and the show. Like at some point you love it until you don't. I thought I was kind of there with Critical Role in Campaign 3. And turns out I was not alone in that. A lot of people were not happy with Campaign 3. It was a bit. It was a slog. It was a meandering slog.
I could not separate the artist from the art with them after 2020.
I know that's
stuff. I was just like, I can't deal with these people anymore.
I understand. I fully understand. And it crept into Campaign 3 more than in the previous campaigns.
Yeah, I didn't really notice it. I mean, other than like all the girl players, they always had to play like a lesbian. Other than that,
they're all lesbians and they're all hooking up. Yeah. They're catering to their audience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that on their side on their side. And I could look past that because there was a lot there in Critical Role to enjoy.
Oh, so much.
But they definitely. I have a lot to say on Campaign 3. Don't get me started. Really,
I only saw.
I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah. Oh, did it just?
It doesn't get better.
Yeah.
It just ended. Yeah, and it doesn't get better. It's a slog. The characters are too chaotic wired, and I think they thought that was funny.
Yeah.
So a lot of the heavy stakes didn't always pan out, and there were a lot of big dramatic moments that got undone immediately by Matt Mercer being the DM, swooping in with a character from a previous campaign, saving the day, or there was a lot of that stuff. No consequences to a lot of their actions.
Yeah.
It was a mess, and a lot of people voiced that particular opinion. I'm interested to see what happens in campaign 4, because they do listen. Believe it or not, they do listen to some feedback, right? They do kind of apply what they hear online. They might not talk about it.
Yeah.
Separating the art from the art, I understand that. I stopped following all their Twitter feeds a while back too. Especially Sam and Liam; those guys were insufferable.
Yeah. I think they're probably the worst ones. Which sucks, because in season 2, I love Sam. Like, Not was hilarious. Love that character.
Yeah, and look, as a half-orc fan, I loved Ford in campaign 2, and then to hear Travis Willingham on an interview talk about, well, he was my commentary on toxic masculinity. My eyes roll into the back of my fucking head.
Oh my god.
It's so cringy. And the dude's an absolute Chad. I don't doubt that he's kind of talking out of his ass because of the industry that he's in to kind of stay in that area. But because the dude's like a solid unit, and he's from Texas.
Yeah.
But and that kind of made me like roll my eyes real hard when it come to 4. But that whole cast for campaign 2 was great.
Yeah.
And I binged all those seasons, all those campaigns, and I highly enjoyed like the creative process behind them, the interaction. I learned to play D&D from the channel Professor Dungeon Master, and just listening to Matt Mercer DM.
That's exactly how I learned. I was watching Critical Role, and I had my PHP open, and I was like, they would do something, and I would go read the rule.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I actually need to touch up on mine because we're in a campaign here, at home campaign. One of my Twitter friends and his wife comes over to play. My kids and I play. We're supposed to play today, but they have another campaign they're in that they're playing online. So I'm doing this instead of doing that.
Yeah. I know, it's always like I play on Thursday nights with some people that I used to work with at Loophole, and usually come over to my house in my garage. But it's even with the two of the guys not having a family, it's still hard to get everybody in the room together.
Yeah, right. I was when it comes to playing D&D, like I knew going in before I started playing it. I like the 5e system, but everybody likes the system they start playing with.
Yeah.
And it's contentious, and you got different factions, and you get some guys on Twitter, like they're so like, you've got to play, if you're going to play actual D&D, you've got to play with like 1-1 timing, tracking inventory, tracking all your arrows fired, right? Stuff like that. I'm like, man, I only got like 2-3 hours a week to play. Like I'm sure it's nice if you got 10-12 hours to play on the weekends, but bro, we can't all do that.
Yeah.
It's not feasible. Some people don't, and at the end of the day, it is just a game. I'm not going to sit there and spend my time playing imaginary Tetris with my imaginary backpack and inventory.
Yeah. Well, let's hit a little more on your book real quick before we get too
sure
too long-winded here. But I really like your travel sequences. I think I like them more than like the in town. Like, I don't know, man. You just got a good flow with like going from one point to another, and like it's not boring. It's engaging. There's like plot development and character development on the road. And dude, on their dwarf road where you're not allowed to camp close to the road, I thought that was hilarious, dude. Like, what just a regulatory, bureaucratic,
Yeah, when I was inspired by some real life events to make the Crown Pantheon authoritarians, over regulatory, to the point that most people hate dealing with it, but the system's kind of rigged in a way towards elves because they live long enough to basically outlive anybody who has a problem with them. And most of the people who are ruling the Crown Pantheon are elvish heritage, right?
Yeah.
Namaria is the one exception, and that's made them like hyper almost religiously fervently loyal to the king for that. But the thing that's kind of caught them there is like Silveria and the Dynasty, they're a bit homogenous by nature.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are saying, some people in reviews have said, well, these seem kind of homogenized and a little boring. I'm like, well, that's actually by design. Like they're meant to be a homogenous melting pot of sort of different races. Some races are a bit nomadic, like halflings don't really have a nation of origin.
Mhm.
The dwarves are homeless, and it's a contentious political issue. Saving that for another book. They don't have a home of their own because Cell Rock drowned it under the sea. And when I come up with these travel series, I do want to like have characters go on a journey. But obviously, if you do it step by step, it becomes like a travel log.
Yeah.
When I mentioned earlier about like old school sensibilities and new school sensibilities is slice of life moments, which I find a lot of newer readers, myself included, really kind of dig, right? And webcomics that were about stuff, you would see a lot more slice of life moments. They really dig those kind of in between the scenes, in between the battles kinds of elements. And I think there's a place for them if you do it in a more of a liberal, sprinkle it kind of conservatively throughout the story.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing's advancing the plot and your characters are just there together, that's a chance for your characters, have the campfire moments. A lot of fantasy readers like the campfire moments. What am I doing with these moments? Are we just chit-chatting and being boring, or are we doing something to develop the characters, advance their own personal stories, advance their character interactions? So by the time you get through, get much deeper in the book, these characters you understand them better, and they understand each other a lot better, and it feels much more like they're friends that have gone on a journey and that they've earned the kind of friendships and loyalties by the end of it.
Yeah. Michael Harris in the chat says, listening in the background, tell Johnny owes me an interview, the jerk.
I do owe him an interview. He lives in China, so like,
what?
I have to get him. Yeah, I have to get him on like an early morning stream at some point. And I haven't had a lot of mornings open lately. Sometimes you guys, if you're open in the morning time and you see me post on Twitter that I'm on Authors and Coffee, I'll do that. I try to have a guest. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Art Snow's been in a guest several times. She stays up all night long for some reason.
Man, a guy named Michael Harris living in China. I kind of want to talk to Michael too. That sounds like he's got an interesting perspective to talk about.
He does, actually. I've got his book, Echoes of Memory. I've got some of his other books on ebook, but he's got this. Michael, you can type it out. I forgot what it is. He can't see the things that he visualizes in his head. I forgot what that's called, but that's an interesting thing for a guy who writes, imaginative fantasy stories to tell, to have. Like the fact that you can't see what you're visualizing. All I see is the stuff. I live more in my head than I do in the real world sometimes. That's where all the ideas from books come from.
Yeah.
I'm a daydreamer, and it's all about putting these things that I cook up in my head when I'm working or driving to work, and putting them into a comprehensive story. And flashes of inspiration have become the bases for books that I have yet to write, and some of them are on the boilerplate for the very near future too.
What do you do like when you're not by wherever it is you usually write and you get an idea? Do you just text yourself or use like notes? Or
if it's something I really don't want to forget, I will open up the Scrivener app on my phone and I will type down like a bit of dialogue or a story idea just to make sure, because I actually will forget it. Michael Harris, he put down there, aphantasia, no visual imagination. Okay, thank you, sir. To see, for a fantasy writer to have that's so strange to me. And then you hear some people like they don't have an internal monologue or an internal voice.
Sounds kind of peaceful, to be honest with you. Get some rest.
Mine never stops. My imagination just never stops moving. It's just a matter of taking what I cook up and putting it into a comprehensive and understandable story.
Yeah.
And to that end, I have worked for a long time to try and be able to learn how to tell stories in a compelling, interesting, and mostly fun and entertaining way. You can't forget the fun and the entertainment, because a lot of people, I think, get a little hell-bent on trying to make their first novel an absolute knockout 10 out of 10 instant classic, right?
Yeah.
And I think you don't really get that kind of skill until much later in your writing career. Brandon Sanderson, for all I could say about him, one thing that I understood that he understood was uh, finding the process for what worked for his novels. And I think he said he wrote like 14 novels before he wrote the book that would become Mistborn.
Yeah.
So by the time his quote unquote first novel was actually like his 15th.
Yeah.
So he had gotten the process down tight before he even started approaching publishing. The good thing he did when he did, because he probably wouldn't have gotten published today. He probably would be dominating the indies, though. And a couple of guys in the indies have kind of what the Macho Man always said: the cream rises to the top. Guys like Ryan Cahill, Corey Ratcliffe, and gosh, I'm blanking on a couple of other guys that are really top tier writers, and everything they put out really good. Matt Denneman, he's I think the indies are really going to be a bit of a proving ground for future trad pub authors, that they can pluck people who have significant enough fan bases, right? That's what happened to Matt Denneman, who did Dungeon Crawler Carl. He was indie for years and became so popular and well known. When you know it, not only did they pick him up for a trad pub contract, he's getting a TV series based on his books.
Yeah.
So now we have a mainstream. So don't ever let anyone on Twitter tell you that the indies are a scarlet letter, a stain on you. Because some of the indie romance authors, I got in a Twitter argument a couple years ago, were trying to espouse that. It was from a thread about a husband who surprised his wife. She wanted to publish her book, and he self-published it for her. And if this is real, like, she got upset, and all the women in the romance authors were on the wife's side saying he damaged her brand forever. No trad pub agent will ever want to touch her again. Like, bullshit. Here's Matt Denneman. He's got to have a TV show, and he's got a trad pub deal, and he was indie. Was that a stain on him?
Yeah.
Alexander Darwin, it happened to him. I guarantee you at some point Ryan Cahill will probably get the same thing. A couple of others I'm blanking on. Larry Correa was indie before he was trad pub. So yeah, never let anyone tell you the indies are an impediment. If you ask me, it is the proving ground where you can really showcase what you can do, the story you can put forward, and the kind of brand you can build based around yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, debut novels are funny because it's like what other job are you judged forever on your first try?
Right.
That's so weird.
Some people were going against Larry Correa when he got in an argument. He gets in arguments on Twitter all the time.
That's how I found him. I didn't know he was an author at first. I just saw him like owning people on Twitter.
Yeah. He's got a bit of boomer rage going on. Bless his heart. And people will go like look up the first passage of the first book he's ever written. And is like, is this you? Is this your writing? He's like, yeah, that's my first novel. I've written 30 cents, and that was written 15 years ago.
And that's a great book.
Kind of point out.
It's like supposed to be silly. Like it's like silly, actiony. He like messes with like action and horror tropes. Like it's not a serious. I mean, there's serious parts, but it's also like a fun kind of it's a funny book with monsters and bullets. It's a gun. He made it for gun nuts and a gun forum on the internet.
Oh yeah, many such cases. Yeah, Larry likes his firearms. He likes his Second Amendment. Bless him.
Yeah.
And I'm much the same way in that. I like to write to entertain. I like to be entertained, and that's what I want out of my entertainment. And I don't get that from the mainstream anymore.
Yeah.
I get very meandering plots. A lot of it's made for streaming, so it's much more dialogue and like storytelling has really taken a hit in the mainstream in the last several years, and it's just not the same. It's not as good. And I think the indies have really kind of stepped up and provided a lot of what we've been missing. As well as being able to be unique and interesting. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah. I got out of the Navy in 2019, and then I started going to school because like while I was in the Navy, I got into D&D, and I just like was just making characters. And I had like wrote when I was a kid and stuff, but I never thought like, oh, I could be a writer. So I was a mechanic, and then I went in the Navy. And then like I got super into D&D, and I was just like making worlds and characters. I was like, I'm gonna give writing a try. And then I started going to school when I got out on my GI Bill, and oh my gosh. the way universities try to teach people how to write. One, it's like you got to be a literary writer. You got to have like your first book has to be a masterpiece. Cliches like saying like I can't remember how many times they use this as an example, but like her hair cascaded down her back or staring daggers. I'm like, first of all, I read plenty of books that use that and I love it. But it gets so focused on teaching the kids. It's like, what is this author's story? Because you don't read any genre fiction in college, so it's all literary, navel gazy, fart sniffy stuff. So what is this author's?
No thanks.
Yeah, what is the story? How is it a commentary on society? And they basically treat the author's viewpoint, which is usually someone that's super diverse or whatever, as like the gospel truth. Like this is how they see America most of the time, and that's how it like that. There's no debating it. So they get really focused on things like race, class, gender, and they're not really learning, elements of storytelling like plot or how to build character. They're just learning how to do commentary on the patriarchy, basically. I feel like that maybe is a huge reason.
And more to the point, the problem with those is that you end up with they have like a very, very limited amount of stories that you tell from that particular point of view, right? Yeah. Most of them are based around victimhood and trauma, and you only have so many stories that you can tell about that, right?
Yeah.
And people always want to read trauma dumps all the time. They don't always want to read about the trauma of this race, the trauma of this being a woman. And, you can have interesting stories about that, but at some point, my God, what's the old phrase? My God, somebody throw a pie.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do something fun. And in the indies, at the very least, you can come up with an idea that breaks the mold a little bit, and there's no reason you can't have fun with it. I don't intentionally try to write comedy into my books. Mm-hmm. A lot of what you see is just my natural sense of humor kind of shining through. A lot of lived in time from the construction field. Yeah. I've had some people say that they busted out laughing from stuff that I've written, but I never try to, quote unquote, be funny, because the harder I try to be funny, the less funny I am. So I couldn't write a joke to save my life. So I just kind of do what comes naturally to me, and I just let it, or just roll with that. I write the kind of book I would want to read. Yeah, and I have indeed read The Black Crown several times, and just like I'm going through and rereading what I'm writing with the Lionheart right now, which is hopefully due out this year. I should have released it last year. Got a little behind thanks to life and everything, but my process has gotten to where what I am putting down, I am like hyper confident in it. Yeah. More so than with Black Crown, and much more hyper aware of what each line is doing and communicating. Yeah. Like this, I've been on chapter 11 for a little while. I'm about to wrap that up. And it might be one of the best storytelling chapters that I've actually ever written, just from a pure introduction, lore building, character building standpoint. Just everything that's going on all at once. And I'm like, I kind of took a step back and go, damn, I've learned a lot here. This is not me the way I wrote about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah. That's got to be cool to see, because similar. I mean, I haven't published anything yet, trad or indie, either way. But I feel like last year I was like, I need to read more books, because I'm one of those kids. So Harry Potter got me into reading. I'm not ashamed of it. I love Harry Potter. It got me hooked.
No shame. It's a good book.
Yeah, it is. But
it's a good book. I like it.
It's so good. As a kid, I didn't want to read anything else, and so I don't have. Last year I was like, I need to start hammering books out. So last year I started my BookTube channel, and yeah, I've just been plugging through and then trying to write on the side. And I feel like reading it and then kind of trying to breaking it down like in these videos is helping a ton. I can notice from like some of the assignments I did when I got out of the Navy at college to like how I write now, I can see, an improvement, and I can also see where I need to improve. So yeah, obviously, the more you do something, the better you get.
Oh yeah. And I've done this for a long time. I started writing when I was 13 in 1993. Nice. And that was just born out of this idea. We had just gotten our first home personal computer. My dad sold his 67 Chevelle. because he was tired of my mom driving it and scratching it up and dinging the doors. The Chevelle is a cool car, but it's not necessarily a family vehicle.
Yeah.
So he sold that, and with some of the money, he got a computer, and it had Microsoft, like the first version of Microsoft Word on it, and I started writing. And I think I was trying, at the time, I started trying to I don't know why, is the mind of a 13-year-old, trying to novelize video games that I play, like Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario and whatnot. Just
save those?
I'll
read that.
No, in fact, and I would die of cringe if anybody read what I wrote during the 90s.
Nice.
Teen dramas and attempts at dramedies and stuff that, sounded interesting at the time, but wasn't. Edgy bullshit, just whatever was fun to me. Me and my cousin both wrote, and we would write and send stories to each other. So I still thank her to this day, for reading my work and commenting on it, kind of keeping me interested in writing after a while, once we stopped kind of doing that. And I got into my 20s, being a hobby writer for so long. And once I got to that skill level where I thought I can do this professionally, that's when it actually started. That's when I had an okay base, but I needed to learn more.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came from reading really good authors of the era. You will see me talk about Sarah Douglas every now and then. She was a big influence, not necessarily from so much of her dark content that she puts in her books, but just how she told a story, how she structured a tale, how she wrote her characters, and big influence. Not that I would ever try and emulate her, because a lot of her material was really dark in a violent and sometimes sexual way. But in a lot of her later books could end up getting a little weird in a way that didn't make sense. But mostly I've been writing long enough to be able to see what kind of things I do like in writing and reading, and also the things that I don't like, and most importantly, what other people don't like, and kind of avoid the pitfalls that other people put in their work, and try to make sure I don't, accidentally do the same thing.
Yeah. Sounds
go ahead.
I was gonna say, Arch Snow, thank you for your. Oh yeah, thank you. I had a great 6 years. It was a good time, and she said they are learning propaganda. Yeah, they absolutely are.
And it makes for a very boring and bad storytelling, and they're kind of starting to see that when they had full unfettered access to properties that were popular, and they can't create anything of their own. They have to co-op properties that were made by more creative and talented people. And once they get full control of them, that's when everything just kind of starts going downhill. You will see like course corrections and whatnot, but it's going to be insincere. Don't fall for it.
Yeah.
Again, this is where the indies are kind of shine in a superior light.
Yeah, I think with them, it's not just like incompetence or poor writing, which it is, but I think they also just hate the content. They hate what it represents. If it represents anything to do with like Western civilization or like traditional like heroism, they just don't like it. Like the writers of The Witcher, the show, they pretty openly hated The Witcher.
They hated The Witcher, and they were annoyed that Henry Cavill wanted to stick to it. They didn't understand their fan base, just like they didn't understand their source material. And they openly in interviews basically spit in their faces. And that's why their season 4 is going to fail utterly.
Yeah.
What is her name? Lauren Hinchcliffe, I think is her name.
I think that's it.
Yeah. I'll never watch anything that she makes ever again, because I know we've seen the kind of creative mind that she is.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Rian Johnson. He wrote unapologetically wrote the entry in Star Wars that basically screwed the entire thing up. And J.J. Abrams did not help.
No, that movie, that was before. When I was just watching things, and I didn't really ever look at anything critically. I was just going to see a movie. It was before like I had to go through all the attempted brainwashing in college. But anyway, I remember going to see that movie. Like I'll admit I did like Force Awakens when it came out. I did recognize that it was just reskin, but like I still I had fun.
I tentatively did enjoy that one as well, but I also understood that my enjoyment of that movie was going to depend on what the follow-up movies were like, and the follow-up movies kind of retroactively made me go, okay, the red flags were there.
Yeah.
and they didn't know what they were doing. Was there any bigger red flag or Chekhov's gun than Captain Phasma? You create this really cool. I know there's a lot of problems, and I could go off on Star Wars forever. They created this really cool looking character played by a really talented actress that people like, and they did nothing with her. Like, she was in 2 movies, and she was a chump in both of them.
Yeah.
It blows me away, the creative idiocy on display in those movies. From everything from the basic to the subtext to the upper text, every facet of those films was the worst storytelling, and that anyone would give anyone else a try at these. And look, I've seen it happen before. I've seen it happen in other media. You lose it and you can't get it back because you tried to do it too much in a creatively wrong way. That's why I have the Age of Adventures, or at the very least, the main storylines. I know where they're going and I know where they're going to end.
Yeah.
Right. And I can do like little side novels and projects in the setting. That's the important thing. I wanted to make a setting that I could tell other stories in the world of Allspire, of any kind, whether it's military sci-fi or grimdark or something. I've got a little cozy fantasy that I've been preparing. Hopefully I can release later this year, something really light and fun.
Yeah.
In this same setting. It doesn't have to do anything with the main plot that's going on. And, readers of the books, know what's going on. They know the structure of the world. So, they can dive in and out. And I can tell prequels that don't go past. I have some hard rules for the Age of Adventures. One of them is no prequels, meaning nothing past the prologue of the Black Crown will ever be put into story form. Anything after that's kind of fair game. I call it like a side sequel.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a ton of prequels that I can think of that I'm like in love with, because like I feel like it just invites problem and potential, plot holes and inconsistencies, like Star Wars again. Like, why did so many things? I'm like, you could just left that stuff out.
That's a problem, but that's not the thing that annoys me about prequels. It is that I'm invested in this world, this story. Each installment is progressing that story forward more and more. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, hard stop, go to the past. Here's characters you might know, some you don't know. Best example of this is Enterprise. I watched Next Generation with my dad, watched DS9 and Voyager. And I was interested to see where the Federation and Star Trek universe goes from here. And then stop. We're going back to the pre-Kirk days of the first Enterprise. Like, I don't want to go into the past. I don't want to see how we met the Klingons. I don't want to do all this shit. I want to see the story progress.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a little problem with that with the Star Wars prequels too. I didn't want to go back in time and see how Obi-Wan met Anakin. It was and spoiler alert, it was kind of boring anyway. And then on top of it, you did a lot of it kind of not great. That was a lot of. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a big prequels fan. Okay, the memes are hilarious. The movies themselves are kind of hit or miss, right? Like Revenge of the Sith is great, but
dialogue-wise, I don't think any of them are good. But yeah, there's story element-wise. I mean, I do like the Palpatine's, his maneuverings and stuff, but I feel like the movies in general just were not executed well.
No, not quite as much. And unfortunately, we complained enough that it drove George Lucas to sell Star Wars to someone who was worse.
Yeah.
We can't win. I think Star Wars is really just kind of destined to become a hit for the Gen X crowd, right? Like it's just going to stay in that particular. It doesn't work outside of it. It doesn't work with newer thoughts, newer storytellings, new sensibilities. And I think the end will be when they finally decide to remake the original trilogy. That'll be the end of it.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't watched anything.
We'll do it.
I didn't even see Rise of Skywalker in theaters. I watched it one time on streaming. I was like, that sucked.
Don't.
Last Jedi I remember watching Last Jedi and I was like, I felt like I was holding a sneeze the whole time, waiting to sneeze, and I could never sneeze. Like, I'm like, when's the punchline coming? I don't understand what's happening.
Oh, Michael Harris in the chat. Good point here. Long flashbacks, yay or nay, John? Nay. That's another. This one might have been. this example I'm about to give you is probably the very origin of my disdain for prequels. The Dark Tower. Wizard, have you read it?
The Stephen King book?
Yeah, well, the series.
I no, I haven't read those.
Okay, I'll warn you ahead of time. Now, I will recommend them. Very creative. Very. If you like Stephen King and you like epic quests,
Mhm.
it's his version of an epic quest. As an imaginative fantasy-ish story, it's phenomenal. It's great. And don't get me wrong, he's a great storyteller. But that series is the best and worst of his stories. Excuse me. But the fourth book, Wizard and Glass, the middle 70% of that book is basically a prequel. I had no idea going into that book because I was rocking and rolling with the books. I read the second book, loved it. The third book was even better. We get about 25% into the fourth book, and the main character of Roland is like, okay, sit down here. I need to tell you this story before our story continues. And it goes back in time to him, his friends, when they're young gunslingers and they're at war, and they go to this town to discover stuff. And it is supposed to outline how he got where he was, the main character, why he hunts the Dark Tower so obsessively, and what his tragic past is. But it was a very slow burn. It was not intriguing to me all that much. And I kept waiting. I was like, when is this going to end? And it didn't end until near the end of the book. And I almost DNF'd it. I'm like, I don't want to continue with this. So yeah, when that did that to me, man, that put my dislike for prequels on a pedestal. Could not do it anymore.
I can see that.
So if you do go and read those, just note, Wizard and Glass. That's a big prequel section in there.
You know, while we're on the subject of prequels, I
will read my friends' sequels. I will read my friends' prequels.
Prequels. Yeah, so I got this. I guess this is a prequel. It's like an extra Season of Storms. Man, I tried 4 times to read this. I had to give up. It was just so crazy that that the writers hate Sapkowski, because he is like one of them. He's a very big. You can tell that he's like an activist type, which usually some of these themes have come up in his other books, and he does a pretty good job of kind of just laying it out there and kind of having a fair, characters will be kind of on both sides, and neither one of them are going to be pointing as an idiot or stupid. But this one, oh my God, it's like the mask was off and he was just, yep, let's go for it.
I think I got partway through one of the Witcher books. I can't remember which one. What stood out to me the most is this nerd has obviously never been in a fight in his life. The way he writes a fight a fight scene, I'm like, this is all. He writes it like a choreographed dance almost.
Yeah, a lot of he even says pirouettes and stuff like that.
And that's all well and good in a controlled environment, but if you read my books, you'll notice that I take the approach of writing fight scenes like a Rocky match, right?
Yeah.
It's all thunder and blood and big hits and screams and a lot of that's because my mentality is that I never lose sight of the fact that I'm telling a story. I'm not trying to tell a blow by blow detail of a fight, right? Yeah. I give the outlines, I give what's going on, but the fights, what's important, it's an extension of the characters having an argument. It's a physical manifestation of some kind of character conflict, and it kind of needs to be treated like that. You got to be aware that your characters can go through a lot of trauma and hits. You haven't gotten to the good stuff where Court kind of starts throwing his weight around a little more. He's always eager to punch, right? Because he come from a town where he was the biggest, the strongest, and most of his problems could be solved by punching people.
Yeah.
And a good example in Revenge of the Sith, the climactic fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Might shock you to hear me say this, but that fight was, well, I do think it was too long, but the only parts of that fight that really mattered were the very beginning and the very end.
Yeah.
They did not need to go up, down, and all around. This is one thing I think the lightsaber fights in the original trilogy were poignant because they were not trying to be these over-the-top spectacles. This was a clash of these characters' conflicts. And they didn't need to be the best choreographed or the most flashy. You didn't need to have Anakin and Obi-Wan flying all over the place, going down lava rivers and everything. What mattered was how it began and, importantly, how it ended. Because again, it's a story, and that's the beginning and the conclusion are the most important parts of the fight. Everything in between is a lot of fun and filler, and I try not to go too far with that. There's a big chapter fight sequence near the end of the book. I'm not going to tell you which one. I end up having to parse down because I'm like, okay, I've got too many moving pieces here, and I need to reduce down what they are, where they are, and what they're doing, because this is confusing even me. And I wrote the damn thing.
Yeah. Oh man, I just brain farted. What I was going to say. Oh well.
I don't know.
Well. Yeah. So what about what's your favorite kind of orc? I mean, you're obviously an orc fan, and I mean there's
Well,
there's your World of Warcraft ones, there's your Warhammer ones, your D&D style. Well, I guess it depends on what generation D&D.
I definitely modeled my orcs more after the Warcraft orcs. It might be strange to hear you say that I didn't actually play World of Warcraft. I couldn't afford $10 a month or have a really good computer at the time it was in its peak, right?
Yeah.
But the reason I wrote the Black Crown to kind of be a story about orcs is because I never really, again, I was trying to go against type. I was trying to be different. And you don't really have a lot of books out there where orcs are the main protagonists. The Indies has provided a couple of others. Jeffrey Spates, Paladin Unbound. He's got a half-orc paladin. I know there's a series titled Orcs. I haven't read those yet. I kind of want to. But you don't see the orcs as the main characters that often. And so the Black Crown, was an attempt to also kind of stand out from the crowd. What am I doing differently than what everyone else is doing?
Yeah.
Well, who else has a half-orc protagonist right there on the cover? And so when it comes to the orcs, I feel everybody when they don't want orcs to basically be watered down to green humans, while at the same time it's kind of what's going on in my book, because the orcs are kind of evolved from humanoid apex predators, and so they are a little more human now than they were in the past. Where in the past they were much more feral.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of at a societal change tipping point that Ragoth is able to latch on to. And you'll see later when you get into the book. It doesn't really jive well with like the Lord of the Rings orcs who are, unrepentantly evil. I feel for, and people who want the old school D&D orcs to be unapologetically evil as well. And I feel for them. And I think my book story kind of stands out, but I kind of picked a bad time for me to tell my what if the orcs were the main character's story, while everybody's kind of trying to go, hey, you know what? We really don't want the orcs to change like this. But you got a whole generation of people that grew up on World of Warcraft, and that's kind of the orcs they saw.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think they should take away like negative attributes and things like that. I think you should keep fantasy races having, different and interesting elements to them.
Yeah.
So that, they don't all just become different flavors of human.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially with Rhaegar though, because he's half human, so it kind of he's not like a full orc, so it kind of explains why he might be a little bit more. He's a green human,
right? Yeah, and he falls that way mostly because I've never really cared for, and Mora was a little bit of a commentary on this too. I've never cared for the seesaw video game mentality of if you have brawn, you therefore must not have as much brain. Or if you're super smart, therefore you're physically inept. Like that's video game mechanics, and it doesn't really apply to real life. And especially like if you, I used to be kind of like into bodybuilding a little bit when I was younger, and man, you talk to these guys who are bodybuilders, like these guys are damn near scientists because they're trying to scientifically hijack their own body's functions and metabolisms in order to get the maximum amount of gains. Like these guys are hyper competitive and hyper competent at what they're doing.
Yeah.
I used to do jujitsu as well. And like these guys who could really fuck you up if you got into a fight with them. Like I'm talking I knew black belts, and these were not like big, boastful, dumb guys. These were quiet guys that folded their arms and leaned off in the corner of the room. And they knew they could probably whoop the ass of anyone in the room with them.
Yeah.
But they didn't have to brag about it, and they weren't stupid about it either. They were very intelligent in their approach. And Mora was like that. Mora is a competent fighter, and she's strong. She doesn't need to rage out like the Hulk in order to get her point across.
Yeah.
She knows she can mess up most people in the room. She could probably beat up a whole tavern by herself, but she doesn't need to, and she doesn't need to prove that to anyone. She doesn't have a fragile ego over it.
Yeah.
So, she's a quiet and contemplative soldier type who's, always aware of what's going on around her. Because I've never liked I've always, I'm old school enough to like the heavy of the group being a chick, just because that's the era I come from. It was still a novelty back then, and it was cool.
Yeah.
And at the same time, someone who is calm, collected, and thoughtful in their approach. Like when she does fight, no move is wasted.
Yeah.
Every swing and every strike is calculated to do the most amount of damage and end the threat immediately, as quickly as possible. And that's just her approach.
Yeah, she comes off as very like perceptive and like you'll speak softly, carry a big stick kind of person.
Yes. But even though the fact she's 7 feet tall and like 300 pounds of muscle, like
she is the big stick.
She is the big stick. That's why I didn't give her a signature weapon. I actually waffled back and forth between what kind of weapon to give her. If you see the fan art that I have of her, I had kind of like a axe hammer combo. I thrown like a big dwarven mace just because I didn't really have any situation where she would need an axe throughout most of the book, so there was no sense in giving her an axe if she's not going to chop somebody with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, she does not necessarily need a weapon, because pretty much, and you'll come up to spots in the book where you see like she doesn't need a weapon. She is the weapon, but anything is her weapon because she's imaginative enough to turn anything into a weapon.
Yeah.
If you know, you know. All right, Snow know. All right, Snow knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to check out Watcher of the Dam. That premise sounds pretty rad.
It is a really interesting, unique, wonderful book. Highly recommend it. She sent me the whole series in a big box, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much, Mrs. Snow.
So for me, I think my favorite orcs, although I haven't actually read any books with them in it yet, is the orcs from Warhammer. The idea that they're like fungus and they grow, and the older they get without dying, the bigger they get, and the whole like everything, like their magic, basically, like their machines work just purely off the fact that they're so dumb.
That's my
that
favorite.
They believe it.
That's my favorite bit of Warhammer 40K lore. The orcs are so stupid that their technology only works because they believe it does.
Like if they were smart, they'd be weaker.
Yeah. Everything I've learned about for Warhammer 40K, I learned against my will. Like the algorithm just shoves those lore videos in my face. I'm almost kind of sorry I didn't get into it way back when, but man, that's a lot to cover. Like the Horus Heresy alone is 52 books. Jesus.
Yeah, I think because they're so like I want to get the actual physical copies with that because I'm a collector in that way, I guess, but. My God, they don't print them anymore. So when you go to like even the used ones are like $60 for a paperback, and if you try to get a new one,
damn,
sometimes it'll be on Amazon for like $3,000. Obviously, that's like those prices like fluctuate. But like the first three, like the base trilogy of Horus Heresy is normal price, like $10 for a paperback. But once you get to book 4, it's all over the place for physical copies. Obviously, you can get you can get the ebook for $10.
The cool thing about Warhammer 40K, once I figured out what it was, made a lot of enjoy. It's an overly serious grimdark fantasy in space. That's what it is. And once I was like, listening to one of them lore videos, these characters talking to each other, I'm like, oh, this is fantasy dialogue. This is not science fiction.
Yeah, it's science fantasy, right? It's a grimdark science fantasy, mill sci-fi.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Basically, it's a great setting.
Awesome.
But I think the lore and the setting must be the most interesting thing about it, because I never hear anyone talk about games they played. Not in the same way I hear about D&D sessions and all the crazy shit that will go on there. And
I mean, that's like, because it's like a combat game, right? It's not like you're
role
playing.
You're not role playing these characters. I think Warhammer is mostly a lore setting,
Yeah.
as well as a model collecting and painting. I think that's mostly part of it. And let me tell you, that's way too expensive for me.
Yeah.
Like last time I looked, like a trio of Warhammer Ultramarines was like $35. I'm like,
They just keep going up in
"Jeez."
price. The price is getting out insane for the minis.
Oh yeah, no, that's a very niche market right there. Good thing they're finding some success in the movies and TV because they're damn sure not getting their money from the models and stuff.
Yeah. I like their video games, man. Like Bolt Gun is a great one. Space Marine 2, I love that game. And then Dark Tide, I play a lot of that with my buddy.
I might play that. I'm actually about to start a gaming channel myself. Not probably won't play that right off the bat because I'm a much bigger fan of like Xenoblade Chronicles. It's one of my favorite JRPG series of all time, and I've played a lot of JRPGs. More to me, those are the epic fantasy novels of video games. Long form storytelling plus gameplay.
Yeah,
it's God, I love JRPGs, and it's been a while since I really sat down and finished one. I figure, well, I might as well start a gaming channel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a separate channel. Sometimes I'll just like stream, like I'll play with my buddy on Saturday nights and just stream it to this channel. But I don't do like reviews or anything. I just do like a couple hours of stream a week for the video game.
I don't want to do it on my main channel because my main channel's got its algorithm set in like the bookish spaces and the pop culture entertainment, some stuff like that. So if I start throwing gaming content onto it, YouTube's not gonna know where to throw my content.
I didn't think about it. Like, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll refrain from doing that. That's a good idea. Or thanks for the tip, I guess.
I mean, if you're serious about like trying to build a channel, and like I've seen other guys like they'll do just gaming content on their channel because whether you do videos or live streams or a combination of both and shorts, if it's gaming content, it's always going to be thrown into the gaming sections, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. But if I'm doing book talks and gaming talks and critical, it's just it won't necessarily know where to throw your book stuff at. My channel gets confused enough with the fact that I occasionally cover comic books, and that's a whole different side of YouTube.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Doesn't fall under the BookTube algorithm.
Not real. No. BookTubers don't
manga?
usually touch comic books. That's it, and that's even a completely different separate thing right there. Now, I will say there is some crossover. Some big YouTube channels like Mike's Book Reviews and Dr. Philip Chase, they've been covering One Piece because everyone's been talking about it. And now it's like the most popular videos on their channel. And it brings in a lot of manga watchers and subs, but they don't always stick around because they're there for the One Piece content and they don't want to talk about Stephen King books.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of how that works. So
Yeah.
It's good if you know your niche and you stick to it. I've been just book and fantasy related content kind of has me in a good little spot. I don't want to mess with that.
Yep. I did a couple of reaction videos and they did way better than my reviews, but I stopped. One, I didn't want to have to constantly look for drama to farm, and that's just not. I don't want to do that.
No.
Two, I want to focus more on book stuff. So.
Yeah. Even though even I wasn't I don't do creator to creator drama content. That's a hard rabbit hole to fall down, and it's hard to stay relevant. And you've got to always be on top of it. Even when the Daniel Green situation was going on, believe me, I waffled so hard back and forth. Which do I make something? Like some days I had myself convinced I was practicing the speech I was going to say in my car, riding back and forth. And then the next day I'll be like, I don't know. And then by the time I did make a video on it, just to say, this is why I didn't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I did get a few Daniel Green clicks, but I didn't want to sit there and go whole hog into it because that was, we were kind of officially in like Ricky Lake and Jerry Springer territory by the time I was able to sit down and actually record anything. I was laughing about it on Twitter though.
I don't know, because I didn't even know BookTube was a thing until I started a BookTube channel, and I was like, oh, look at all these cool channels. So I didn't even know who that guy was. Like I saw the drama blowing up, and I was like, I guess he's the biggest BookTuber out there. But
From a metric standpoint, yes. Although he's got less than he used to. I will fully admit, I was never a fan or a friend of Daniel Green. How do I put this? He always kind of came off a little disingenuous, not quite as authentic as some of these other guys do. And he was definitely a little more agenda driven than other booktubers are. And there were times he couldn't keep that out of his content.
Yeah.
So I just kind of, there were other guys who were better doing what he does. Mike's Book Reviews is great. Beard of Darkness, I like watching him. And he had some StreamYard trouble this night. He wasn't able to stream tonight. Poor guy.
Beard of Darkness. He's one I follow.
Yeah. And BookTube's in a good spot where a lot of people come into it, and newcomers are really welcomed. And we signal boosted. Everyone is anxious to hear newer people talk about books, and I would call myself more of an author tuber because I'm not strictly booktube content. I can't do the booktube content the way a lot of other ones do it because they're reading at a way faster pace than I do.
Yeah. And
two, they talk about books in a way that I kind of just don't. Like, I like doing my reviews, and yeah, they don't always single book reviews don't always get a lot of views that other content does, but I still want to do them.
Yeah.
And, I know the authors that are tickled to death to see my reviews, and I've tried to make my reviews different than what everyone else does. So, when I do put out my reviews, they're a little more meaningful.
Yeah.
And, sit down and talk about everything I liked about a book in a way that is just, natural and interesting. And look, my channel's a platform for myself as an author brand, but I was going to read these books anyway. I might as well talk about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people put out
no reason
crazy. Like their reading pace is insane. Like I got 3 kids. I just had one of my last kid's a newborn, not even a month old yet. So I can't. I don't have time to-
Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, I can't be reading books like that nonstop.
Well, even when I sit down and I'm totally locked in on a book, I can't really read that fast. And plus, I've got so many time-intensive things between reading, writing, D&D, video work. It becomes hard. Like, video games is the one that was really the one that took the hardest hit of all my hobbies and time-intensive hobbies. So, I make time to read now because it's good to kind of disconnect and get lost in someone else's world. And that's what I've always wanted from books. And that's what I've always wanted to provide with my books.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I like about, because I can just pick a book up and read it. But video games, I get sucked. If I want to, I'll get sucked into it for hours, and I just can't do that. And the ones I play now are just usually multiplayer games that I can play with my buddies. So we'll do Helldivers 2 or Space Marine or whatever.
Yeah. I'm not a big multiplayer fan myself, but I love those single-player JRPGs.
Yeah.
I could talk about them for a while, but I'm going to put that content on the gaming channel when that gets up, hopefully before. I'm hoping to have it launched in time for March 20th when Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition lands, because I am so hyped for that game. I had the original on Wii U, and it was told to us for years that we would never get a port because it was too... it would be too costly.
Yeah.
They didn't know if Nintendo wanted to invest in it. More or less would have to build the game from the ground up essentially again. And Xenoblade over time has become one of their biggest Nintendo brands.
Yeah.
So it was worth it to them finally to bring it on over from the Wii U. It was locked on a bad system, unfortunately.
Yeah, I definitely do.
And now it's here.
Yeah.
Now the whole series is on the Switch right now. All 4 Xenoblades and the 2 DLCs. And we can kind of move forward into the Switch 2 and see where the series goes from there.
Yeah.
I'm anxious.
Yeah. I picked up Final Fantasy 1, the Pixel remaster on my iPhone. Dude, that kicked ass. That was an awesome little game to play on my phone. And it was very
interesting.
Like a traditional, because the first Final Fantasy I played was 10 when I was in middle school. And so it was way different. It was almost like a legit D&D setting. There's dwarves and were there dwarves? Yeah, there were dwarves, and it seemed like much more traditional, whereas like Final Fantasy X or like 7 have like all the crazy characters and monsters and stuff.
Yeah, the more steampunkish ones.
Yeah.
That was an interesting shift. I was never the hugest Final Fantasy fan, but I've played my share. And 9, I love that one. 10 was pretty good too.
Yeah.
That was an addicting battle system there. But I know I could talk for hours usually, but I'm starting to lose my voice, bro.
Fair enough.
It's getting a little scratchy just from talking. I did a bunch of other talking earlier today with some family and friends, so I'm kind of losing it now, man. We I hate to say it, but we kind of need to wrap it up. And I don't have a private chat to put that in on my end. I couldn't tell you. I just have to say, hey, man, we need to wrap up. I'm sorry.
That's
I
totally
gotta
fine.
get going for the night, and I got my weekend special to work, so I got to get to bed before too long too.
All righty. Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, it was a blast, man.
Yeah, had a good time.
Happy to come back anytime. Hopefully I can see you when the Lionheart releases a little later this year. I'm hoping sometime by summer.
Sounds good. Yeah, I got to get your book knocked out. Longer than I thought it was going to be, but yeah, I was like reading. I was like, my progress isn't going up as fast as I like.
Don't worry. Once you hit like the 50% mark in that book, man, it snowballs downhill. You won't be able to put it down. Even when I was editing, I would catch myself in the back half of the book reading it and forgetting that I was supposed to be editing.
Nice. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming on. I had a great time.
Now, sorry my camera clonked out, but thank you for having me and listening to me chit chat.
Yeah, no worries about the camera, man. At least we could hear you.
And now your camera clonked out.
Did it?
You roboted on me.
Oh, is it better now? Well, anywho.
Yeah.
All right. All righty, man. Well, you take it easy, dude.
Take care, man.
All right. Later.